Okay, so in this lecture, we're going to be talking about animals in fables, and we're going to focus in on Aesop's fables. And you probably are familiar with Aesop's fables just from, growing up and being told. I think the Tortoise and the Hare was the one that I'm most familiar with, where you have that race between the very slow and steady tortoise, and then the hare that just is very cocky and thinks it can win the race really fast and is very overly confident in its abilities to beat the tortoise in this race. But slow and steady wins the race, and the hare, the overconfidence of the hare, the rabbit, makes him lose. So there's this lesson not to, don't underestimate the slow and steady. So all these animal tales are like what Aesop's fables were used to communicate wisdom. They also had a sort of moral lesson. So in that one, you could be, don't be overconfident or cocky. So there's always going to be a moral or lesson attached to a fable. And they're often tales that were used for entertainment purposes, but also teaching purposes. Um, and they were for children, but also adult audiences. So we often think of them as children's tales, but the fact is that in the context in which they were originated, so in sort of mid-6th century Greece, when Aesop was, you know, recording these tales, he they would have had a sort of different context, a more complex role in society. So Aesop's fables are often considered some of the first tales in Western literature to use animal characters. And these are human or animal characters who possessed often human traits. So they'll have the capacity to speak and convey other human-like behaviors, so they're anthropomorphized. Aesop himself was presumably a slave in ancient Greece, and fables are often associated with sort of the lower classes in Greek society. So there's this level in the audience as well that we can consider when we're reading some of the fables, and we can say like what can these tales tell us about Greek society. So there's often embedded in them um, wisdom that could relate to the social hierarchy of Greece and of the Greek society. So Aesop's fables often deal with ethical conflicts. So the animals in situations where you have to, decide what's right and wrong, whether it's good to be, honest or not. So these are human issues. They aren't issues that animals have to deal with. These are really just animal characters standing in for human situations. So human characteristics and human traits and circumstances in society are projected onto animals, and that's what's being conveyed in fables. So it is allegorical. Aesop is a kind of, he's writing fables as allegory. So that just means on one level, on the surface level, there's a story, there might be a story about a turtle and a rabbit, and they have a race. But in the larger context or the allegorical level, this is a situation that can relate to human society and can be applied to our own lives and teaches a lesson about human behavior, not just animals. So these are moral stories, so we're supposed to learn from them, and there's a lesson embedded in them. And one of the things that is helpful when you use animals in stories such as fables or fairy tales is the fact that we associate certain traits or behaviors with animals. So it's almost like they have a stereotype, or they convey just a kind of symbolism. They symbolize, they're symbolic of certain qualities. So, for example, we think of a fox. We say, our metaphors for foxes are, he's cunning like a fox. So foxes are always cunning, tricksters. Um, so that's how Aesop is going to use them in the story. So any fox will convey those kind of characteristics. Lions are always, the king of the jungle. Lion, to have a heart of a lion is to be brave and strong and powerful. So in Aesop's fables, he's going to have lions represent nobility and rulers, the ruling class, the powerful. Dogs we think of as loyal. Wolves we think of as evil and dangerous and tricksters again. Um, Mice we think of as lowly. They're usually thought of as vermin, or um, low on the animal food chain. So you can think of some of the metaphors too that we have around animals, quiet as a mouse, quick like a rabbit, um, you know, all of these kind of metaphorical associations that come with animals are also going to be embedded in some of these animal fables. And if you think about as well the social context in which these tales are written, so we're dealing with Greek society, and Aesop as a former slave. We could also start reading into some of the fables as well, and looking for embedded message or meaning in that context. So, in some cases, fables were viewed as sometimes viewed as political, either political or social satire, or criticism of government or the ruling classes. So in Greek society, fables were often associated with the lower classes, and then they used them as a way to criticize the authority in Greek society, like the rich upper class, or the government. So they're a way to convey criticism without outwardly, say, having a protest, or holding a rebellion. So they could use these fables and kind of hide, or have a kind of latent criticism of the government without being punished for it. So it's a way for the weak and the powerless in Greek society to really speak out against the strong and the powerful of society. And we see that kind of in stories where you have weak animals, animals who are underestimated, be successful or helpful or have value that we maybe didn't see in them to begin with. So in the tale of the lion and the mouse, it's the lowly mouse that helps the lion. So we see that through good behavior, and it reminds us, these lessons or these tales remind us that somebody's, don't underestimate somebody just because maybe they're poor or weak or small, that they have a value in society. So if you applied that to human society as well, you could also see that maybe if Aesop was a slave or from a lower class of Greek society, that it would be also about, appreciating and valuing all humans, not just, the ruling class or the wealthy or the dominant, but to regard all people from any, social strata in society as having value and helpful qualities that, when brought together, can be a positive thing for society. So often these fables, they go beyond just being children's entertainment, and you can kind of read into them, apply the lessons to human society, and start thinking about what we're really learning when we're reading tales about animals, such as Aesop's fables. Okay, so I'm going to give you a couple of examples, and I want you to start thinking about what the moral or lesson is of the tales. So this is one of the challenges that I'll give you on the course homepage.